Succulents make a popular little houseplant. They're pretty well behaved, they don't grow too fast, and they're really hardy. They look kind of dramatic with these big fleshy leaves. But we have plenty of native succulents in Washington State as well, so let's meet a few of those. The first thing that may come to mind when you think of succulent is a cactus, like this little hedgehog cactus here. And cacti are succulents. They seem to be about the only family that consistently uses this strategy. But just because it's a succulent doesn't mean it's a cactus. So here's an example of spreading stonecrop. It's a member of the Stonecrop family, really common here in Washington State. May look fairly familiar, and there's lots of different species, but it utilizes that succulent strategy. In this case, succulent leaf, and the fleshy leaves allow them to withstand drought and really hot temperatures. And most of these live, as their name suggests, right there in the rocks. Not much competition. They spread both by seeds and by their stems breaking off and setting down roots somewhere else in a little patch of gravel somewhere. So they don't have a lot of competition, and they do pretty well in these rocks. Stonecrops have 5 petals like you'd expect of any dicot. They have 10 little dainty stamens sticking out, and then 5 little pistils right in the middle that turn into this little star-shaped bunch of follicles that spread tiny, tiny little seeds around. So this one, the spreading stonecrop, is probably something that you'll see around pretty obviously if you're hiking in the mountains. It grows on ridges, like I said, in rocks. And since the leaves tend to turn really red at different times, then it really stands out in the backdrop. So spreading stonecrop is one. Another very different plant is Bitterroot. So this is in the miner's lettuce family. So the strategy on this one is to put out succulent fleshy leaves. It does this fairly early in the spring, and they look like little tentacles of like a sea anemone or something like that coming out of the ground. And you kind of wonder, what is that too? It's just a strange little plant. And to make it even more strange, a little bit later in the summer, around June, the leaves have faded away, and then out of the ground, seemingly out of just the dirt, pop the flowers. Kind of primitive looking flowers with many, many petals and lots of stamens and such. It's just a bunch of flowers, usually a pretty big, showy mass of them. Here you see a bunch on a ridgeline up in the mountains, but they'll grow down into the shrub steppe as well. A really dramatic display from a hardy plant. So you'd think this plant would be named for these beautiful, showy flowers, but it's named for the root, Bitterroot. And the reason for that is it's a staple crop of many people of the Pacific Northwest, and if harvested at this point, the flavor is really mild. I've tried it myself, and it's really actually quite nice. But apparently it was given to Meriwether Lewis and Clark, and they thought it was really bitter. It must have been harvested later in the season, as it does get a little more bitter. And the name stuck, Bitterroot, and even the genus name is named after Meriwether Lewis, who named the plant. So there's Bitterroot. On to the cacti. We do have several native cactus species here, and all cacti are succulent. And that means they have fleshy stems and leaves, although these parts that look like leaves are really their stems. They're just succulent stems. The leaves are these tiny little things right here. They're kind of reddish, usually come out in the spring, just a small fleshy leaf, and then they drop that and replace it with these hard spines that also come off. They're barb tipped and they come off easily, so watch out for these. They're not real pleasant to get in your shoes, or sometimes dogs will get into them and they'll cling to them. And one warning, after having spent some time in Arizona with a lot of these, don't try to kick them off, because a lot of times they will hang on for a little bit and then come back and hit you in the chest or the neck or something like that. So just enjoy looking at these, especially if you catch them in flower in the early summer. They have these beautiful many, many petaled yellow flowers with Lots of stamens in the middle, as you can see, and this one pistil sticking up, this little branched in the middle. The fruits are kind of interesting. Here we can see over on the left the flowers have faded, and we have the fruits kind of sunken down in here, and the stem sort of grows up over the fruit. So there's the Columbia prickly pear. There's a couple of prickly pear species in the state. They look pretty similar, really low to the ground, growing in the shrub steppe, especially where they transition into the foothills and mountains. You can see on the base here there's a bunch of oak leaves on the ground. So kind of in that area is where you might expect them. A little less likely to run into, but a real treat, is the hedgehog cactus, another member of the cactus family. This one is really adorable. Those spines are far less wicked, sharp, but they don't come off and they're not likely to impale you. So they're pretty cryptic. If you come on them most times of the year, you'd be hard-pressed to find them among the kind of grayish plants in the shrub steppe. But there they are, just hiding among the rocks. When they bloom in April with these beautiful pink flowers, then they're a lot more showy and enjoyable. You want to take one of these home for sure because it just looks so lovely. But please, just leave it where it sits and enjoy it. Take a few photos if you need to. They almost always die if you try to transplant them, from what I understand. I've not tried it myself, but I took the advice and just enjoy them where they are. I hope you'll do the same. One last group that I wanted to mention, different family but uses the same succulent strategy, and that is the Saxifrage family. Its name literally means rock breaker, and you will find them growing in rocks. You can see that here in every picture. This middle one, you see it growing just right on the side of this little cliff face. Here on the side, we got lots and lots of them growing among the rocks, and they probably do break it down a little more quickly with their roots penetrating. Some are somewhat succulent, like this one on the upper left. They have kind of fleshy leaves, not tremendously so, but this one down here, quite a bit more fleshy, with those big white showy flowers that come out of the little mat. And most saxifrages grow as this sort of mat. They make an attractive garden plant in rock gardens and just here and there. A lot of people will plant them as that. You'll see them often in rocks, but sometimes you'll see them in a meadow as well with more leathery leaves. So a really diverse group. Even just the genus Saxifraga is fairly variable. Not all of them look exactly the same, but their flowers are fairly distinctive. So look for these when you're hiking around and enjoy another succulent plant of Washington State. Well, that's it for this short group. I hope that you will be able to find some of these on your next outing and enjoy just a different way of getting along in the world. Until next time, happy botanizing.